Challenges presented by COVID-19 pandemic have hit the world hard, and universities are striving hard to get out of these difficult times. To be part of global rankings, universities need to focus on teaching, research, internationalization, industry income, and knowledge transfers. The global rankings assist all the stakeholders in different manners. Like students get assistance in taking their educational decisions. Faculty get assistance in taking their career-related and growth decisions. Universities leaders get assistance in setting their strategic priorities, while the governments get assistance in framing and monitoring their education policies. Hi, this is Fawad,
And I'm Sajda.
and we welcome you to the most exciting live show, Qtrix, which is brought to you by ILMA University in collaboration with Rotary District International 3271, powered by Noman Group of Companies.
Well, Qtrix aims to bring the celebrities from academia and industries in front to speak the hot button issues related to quality trends and new directions in the post COVID 19 digitech world. Ladies and gentlemen, the topic of our today's show is Times Higher Education, the nucleus in global rankings orbit. With us today is Phil Batty, who is the ranking guru and chief knowledge officer of Times Higher Education and is an international authority on universities' performance and strategy with more than 25 years of experience in global higher education. Before starting our conversation with him, let's see his short profile video.
Phil Baty is currently serving as Chief Knowledge Officer at Times Higher Education and is an international authority on university performance and strategy, with more than 25 years of experience in global higher education, including a decade, 2009 to 2019, as editor of the prestigious Times Higher Education (THE) World University Rankings and its derivative analyses. He is a sought-after speaker, commentator and consultant, and he currently leads government affairs activities at the trusted global data and insights partner for the higher education sector. He was the creator of the World Academic Summit, and he oversees the team that organizes the summit and this extensive series of international events and awards, which now engage more than 40,000 university leaders, academics, business executives and policymakers annually. He holds a B.A. Hons. in History from King's College London and a postgraduate diploma in journalism from City University London. He was listed as one of the top 15 most influential in education by the Australian newspaper in 2012, and in the 2016 book, Global University Rankings and the Medialization of Higher Education, he is described as one of the most powerful commentators, and arguably policy actors, on higher education. He joined Times Higher Education, THE, in 1996, and served as chief reporter, news editor, deputy editor, editor-at-large and editorial director, before taking his current role as chief knowledge officer. He took over responsibility for the World University Rankings in 2008 and led the development of the World University Rankings methodology, determining the 13 performance indicators and weightings currently used to evaluate world-class research universities. He is an award-winning journalist. He picked up the Ted Bragg Award for Sustained Contribution to Education Journalism, CIPR, in 2010 and was a runner-up for the Paul Foot Award for Campaigning Journalism, run by The Guardian and Private Eye magazine in 2007. He contributes regularly on global higher education for leading newspapers and broadcasters around the world. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Phil Baty.
And it's really an honor for us.
Hey Phil, how are you? Welcome to the show. And again,
Thank
it
you
is good to have you. And
Thank
we
you.
look forward for the exciting conversation. So, are you ready? Should I move?
Absolutely ready when you are. Fire away.
All right. So moving forward, Phil, The very first question is, what is the vision of Times Higher Education and how does it differ from other global rankings?
Well, the first thing I would say is perhaps that Times Higher Education is so much more than just the rankings. We actually celebrated last year our 50th anniversary. We were founded in 1971 as a weekly newspaper, part of the Times of London, a supplement of the Times of London, reporting on higher education affairs from London, but across the world in terms of understanding higher education and its position in the world. So we've been providing intelligence and information to the global higher education sector for 5 decades. We're in our 6th decade. And we also, of course, have the world rankings, but we also have a global events series. We have a hiring solutions business, so we help universities find talent, fill roles. We have data and analytics services, consultancy services. So actually, I think we're much more than just the ranking. But our mission is very clear. We're here to support universities, whether that is supporting individual universities to improve and develop, whether that's supporting governments in helping to understand and manage and strategically plan the policy environment to improve higher education systems, whether that's to help academics and individual scholars make career decisions, make progression decisions, be more impactful, find new careers, find opportunities. And of course, we help universities through helping students. We're supporting millions of students across the world to make informed decisions about the most important decision in their life, which is who to trust with their own education. So we're incredibly expansive. We consider ourselves to be fully global and focused on supporting the excellence that already happens in global higher education and supporting the excellent, outstanding talent of students and faculty to realize their ambitions.
Amazing.
Undoubtedly, the role of Times Higher Education is really appreciative, and the team that is working day and night and contributing to the world is highly acknowledged. Now, moving forward, Times Higher Education uses basically 13 types of performance indicators in global ranking of universities. So can you shed light on these 13 performance indicators so that our universities can learn about how to reach to that global ranking arena?
Of course, yes. So the World University Ranking is our flagship ranking. We do produce other rankings, but the World University Ranking is our earliest, our first ranking. It's founded in 2004. And we think that sets the gold standard for what we would consider to be a global, research-intensive, world-class university. So actually we have, I think, the most balanced, the most comprehensive ranking methodology in the world. We're looking at 13 indicators, as you say, but they cover the full range of a university's activities. We have a pillar regarding the teaching environment, teaching and learning, teaching excellence, 5 separate indicators around teaching, including reputation, including faculty-student ratios, including the supervision of postgraduate degrees. We have a lot of weight on research. We look at research impact. So we're analyzing 108 million citations to 14.5 million publications. And the publications could be journal articles, book or book chapters, conference proceedings. So we're analyzing the influence of research very, very thoroughly across the entire world. And that's about citation analysis. Subject normalized, of course, so we don't privilege any one subject over another. We'll look at pure scholarly excellence in research across more than 330 different subject areas to provide a view of the impact of every university's research relative to global averages. We're also looking at research productivity, how successful a university faculty in producing outcomes, research papers in the world's indexed sources. But we look at research income, your ability to draw in and attract income from both funding bodies, but also from the private sector, from industry. It's vital that we understand a university's relationship with society through those industry partnerships, through that knowledge transfer from the laboratory, the classroom, out into the wider world, and that also universities are contributing to economic growth. We also look at internationalization. We believe that world-class research universities need to be global in their outlook. So we look at their ability to attract international talent. We look at their ability to draw in international student talent and international faculty talent. And then we're looking at the collaboration of research across borders. We believe that you can't solve the world's grand challenges in isolation. Outstanding research is inherently global. We're challenging and sharing our problems and our solutions to those problems. So we reward universities for collaborating with international partners in research. So yes, overall 13 metrics, providing what I believe is by far the most comprehensive, the most balanced system of measurement in the world. And what's exciting is that actually universities can pick and mix and break down those indicators to provide their own benchmarks, their own profiles. So we're very, very proud of the gold standard ranking that we've produced.
Phil, I have a question. Speaking about students' development and their contribution, Times Higher Education has also recently started, I think, conversation with the students of different universities. So, can you just briefly highlight what is the concept behind that and what is that?
So our foundations really were as a university information source. So our origins in 1971 were very much about working with university leaders, working with governments, working with the stakeholders of higher education policy making, and of course, working with academics and faculty to support their career development, their careers. But since we created the World University Rankings in 2004, of course, we have attracted many, many millions of students to our website. So for many years, we were producing rankings for university leaders, but students were very, very desperate for this information. They wanted support in making these really difficult decisions. They wanted trusted independent data. So we started seeing millions of students on the site, and we felt it was very important that we start serving their needs by providing them with clear content for them. If they come and look at a ranking, they don't want to necessarily read about the president or the vice chancellor's strategic decision making or the funding policies of government. They want to read about student experience. They want to understand what are the factors involved in making a decision as a student. How do you select a university that's right for your own personal needs? So we've very recently launched THE Student, which is a platform very much dedicated to students, giving students all the information they need from rankings, but also from peer-to-peer assessments. We have live peer-to-peer conversations on the site. We have a range of partners to support students in finding the right university for them, in filtering the data. And of course, it provides fantastic resource for universities themselves who want to attract the best talent in the world. So yeah, we have a platform for academics, policymakers, and the university community, but we have a separate platform now entirely for students making those really challenging decisions about where to study.
Well, I think that is really a great initiative, and that was really the required one as being an individual universities, being, based on the country level, we are working hard to, talk to the students and look at their needs and what they want and counsel them. But at a global level, that is, I think, the great initiative.
And while the teaching is important, research is important, knowledge transfer is important, but student and alumni engagement is also another important arena that is quite helpful in taking the universities at far and to the global arena. Yes, we do understand and we agree with you. And hats off to the initiative of Times Higher Education as far as the student engagement is concerned.
I'd just say briefly, actually, there is we have a panel of 150,000 students that we can survey at any time we like. So we can constantly take the pulse of student opinion. We can see what students are concerned about, what matters to them. And of course, in some of our rankings, we have a student engagement survey, which again probes them. Are they being challenged? Are they being stretched? Would they recommend their school or their experience to other students? So we've got a really great wealth of data now on the student decision-making, student engagement.
And Phil, what I recently analyzed is that all the organizations that are contributing to online teaching resources, like there are private institutions that are contributing and providing online services to the institutions. So they are also working very closely on the surveys and getting data from the students because they are the real stakeholders, and their input is basically required to improve the quality of education in the universities. So yeah, you are right. That's true.
All right. Moving forward, the next question is like, how will Asia-specific rankings shape the global status of the universities at Asian level?
Yeah, with Times Higher Education, we're very keen to ensure that we put our data into context. So the world rankings are there to help support the global ambitions of globally focused universities. So of course, at the top end, you have Harvard or Oxford or Stanford or MIT or Cambridge. But actually what we've seen in recent years is the remarkable rise of Asia. That's been fueled, I think, more by East Asia. So you have, of course, China making rapid progress up the rankings. We now have, well, actually back in 2016, we had 2 Chinese universities in the world top 200. We now have 10. With the top 2 Chinese universities have entered the top 20 in the world. So that's Tsinghua and Peking. We've also got Hong Kong universities rising up the rankings, South Korean universities rising up the rankings, Singaporean universities rising up the rankings. So we're seeing this groundswell of a great leveling up of the East and the West. The East are starting to rise and tip the balance back away from just the very, very dominant Western nation. So it's great to see that at the world level. But what we also want to understand is some universities won't compete with Beijing or Peking universities or Harvard or Oxford. Some universities want to operate in a national context. Some universities want to operate in a regional context. So we provide a sort of almost a filtered version of the world rankings to allow an Asia focus. And I think that's really helpful because it means individual Asian universities can monitor themselves against a more direct group of peers. And we can see and celebrate the real dynamism within the continent itself. Of course, Asia is an extraordinarily rich and diverse continent. And I think also by highlighting Asia, it allows us to understand, where South and Southern Asian nations are starting to develop, starting to show great progress. And they're not just crowded out or pushed down by the traditional Western elite or the East Asian rich institutions. So it's all about trying to provide context and nuance to allow universities to make their own pathways for development, to provide the support that they need in their own context against their own mission. But for me, just to clarify, Asia is one of the most exciting regions, the most exciting continent in global higher education. And I think the cliches that we're in the Asian century are very clear. They're very true when it comes to higher education and research.
So, Phil, as you just said that these universities, in a very short span of time, proved to be at higher level. So, what was the one key factor that made them to get into this arena? I know that they must be working on research, teaching, and different indicators, but what was the one thing that took them to this global arena?
Well, I guess if you boil it down to one thing, I think we have to be quite frank and say perhaps it's money. There is a challenge that great world-class universities do require lots of resource. And if you look at China, for example, there was a decision at government level to say we want our universities to be more competitive on the world stage. And in order to do that, we need to invest in them. So there was a very significant increase in funding available for Chinese universities to produce stronger research. And that's about for facilities and equipment and laboratory standards, but it's also about people and talent. You need to pay the salaries, you need to attract talent with positive terms and conditions and good personal rewards for their success. So money, I think, was integral, but actually, as well as money, you really do see a broader environment in valuing research as part of an economic growth policy. Universities are driving countries from developing countries to developed countries. The knowledge economy, skills, graduate skills, but innovation and new ideas are driving economic growth. And that's been behind, I think, China in particular, but also South Korea. South Korea's transformed its economy in just a number of just 3 or 4 decades. They have become the most knowledge intensive nation on the planet through great research and innovation. But then it also takes talent. We need to find ways to retain talent from the country, but also draw in talent from all over the world. And China was very successful, I think, in bringing Chinese scholars who left China to study and build careers outside, mainly in the West, to attract them to return and help with the nation building back at home. And they've been incredibly successful in attracting scholars back, Chinese scholars back home. But on top of that, now they're becoming so strong, they're attracting international scholars to come and work in their laboratories as well, because they have some of the best laboratory equipment in the world in particular fields.
Right. So in order to be successful university in the globe, so we need to follow these universities and the trends that they follow. So this is, obviously focus on investment on research and development, raising the budget, and being innovative and creative. Yes, you're right. These are the major factors of success for any university.
And I think these factors are like letting the Asian institutions to meet at the higher aspirations, looking at like at the ranking level. So that's I think great.
Now moving forward, Phil, post COVID-19, because this was a hard time. So now after this COVID scenario, what do you think? How should now universities write their strategies and move ahead?
Well, I think there's a huge amount of change. And I think the most important thing from the pandemic is perhaps we'd all predicted absolutely radical reform and change. And I think perhaps that's not coming true. There is a sense that I think the universities were extremely resilient and very, very innovative in responding to a crisis. The way that they pivoted their teaching to be online and remote was unbelievably successful, in the sense that it was a huge challenge. The entire world had to move to remote teaching overnight. The way universities handled themselves there was very, very encouraging. But I think the idea that maybe we have a permanent revolution where distance learning will dominate and the traditional campus degrees will die out, or the model will be disrupted, I think that's slightly over the top. I take a more conservative position there, because it's clear from us on our research that students still very much value the residential experience, the in-person experience. There's still a huge demand for in-person classes and the kind of community that you get from in-person classes. But what I think will happen in teaching is that we will learn all the best innovations from digital and remote teaching. We can keep those amazing innovations and blend them with the best of in-person. So I think we're going to see a much more blended approach. We can deliver lectures more efficiently, deliver some of the more basic information much more efficiently online, remotely, which allows universities to perhaps focus more intensely on more personalized learning, more intimate seminar-based sessions, more small group sessions, more problem-based sessions in terms of their classroom resources. We can use digital tools to enhance students' engagement. We can use digital tools to actually encourage people to engage more. Some people are more reluctant in a seminar or a lecture to speak out, more relaxed and comfortable doing that through screens. The most exciting thing for me is digital data. We can understand students' learning, students' behaviors much better. And although, of course, I think there's some controversy around monitoring and surveillance, we can really start to understand individual student needs and challenges and problems by monitoring their behavior online, their classroom contributions. And we can intervene more effectively around offering additional support or guidance. So I think the teaching environment will change dramatically, but not in the sense of a revolution and the end of the campus or the end of lectures. The other perhaps major change, I think, from the pandemic is universities are really getting back to understanding and communicating their impact. We saw through the pandemic that universities were at the forefront of helping the world out of this crisis. Universities were leading the development of effective treatments to treat victims, people who had fallen to COVID-19. We dramatically improved the success rates of treatment through various innovations through universities. Universities, of course, were providing the statistical modeling, the epidemiology to help shape the policy response to the pandemic. Universities were providing the economic modeling to help us understand how society responds and changes to the dreadful challenges of the pandemic. And of course, universities were at the heart of the development of successful vaccines and the incredible quick rollout of vaccines. So I think universities proved without doubt that they are fundamental to helping the world become a better place. They are absolutely key to solving some of the biggest challenges we face: climate change, for example, food security, even I would say war and conflict. Universities are the bridges to bring people together. So universities, I believe, are realizing that they have to be more clear on their public good, their public responsibility, and their ability to make the world a better place. And one of the things we've seen at Times Higher Education is their willingness and their readiness to express this through the Sustainable Development Goals. They are able now to monitor and demonstrate how much progress they're making through the Sustainable Development Goals to deliver those goals. And the Times Higher Education impact rankings use the SDGs as the framework. And I think it's a really exciting revolution that universities are embracing this new way of understanding excellence, new way of understanding their contribution to the world. So yeah, lots and lots of change, but nothing revolutionary in that sense.
Phil, then how did South Asian universities, played their role during this COVID, as it started from the Asian countries? So what do you think, how did they made themselves like as the stronger or emerging or wiser to be in the list of COVID? How did they, compete and differentiate it in the terms of innovation than the other regions?
Well, one thing we saw in the rankings last year actually was the rise of COVID research papers. So actually, because we analyze 14 million research outputs, we can analyze changes and trends. And one of the things we saw, particularly from China, was a rapid increase in the number of papers tackling the issue of COVID. And those papers were, of course, highly influential, highly cited, because the world was trying to gather as much information. So interesting enough, Wuhan University itself, where the pandemic began, actually had a research boost. There was lots of research on COVID coming out of Wuhan and very highly cited research. So we saw specific immediate responses to the pandemic through particular China. But of course, the big issue there was it was about sharing quickly, providing as much information as possible into the public realm to allow universities all over the world to gather intelligence and share information and make rapid progress. So I think it's a universal thing that universities globally embraced this change. But in terms of South Asia, I think there's a general trend happening that I believe universities in South Asia are on the rise in general. I think we've seen, particularly in Pakistan, I think, some incredibly exciting developments. Maybe there is an agility there, a hunger in Pakistan for universities to drive change and to improve, the prospects of the nation as a whole. So in the world rankings, we saw Pakistan is one of the world's most fast improving nations across a range of key metrics. Our analysis will show that of our 5 pillars of activity, which is research, knowledge transfer, internationalization, teaching, and research productivity and reputation, Pakistan was among the top 5 most rapidly improved nations in the world across a 5-year window for international outlook. So your universities are more internationally engaged. For industry links, so your universities are collaborating more with private sector research and development in the business sector, and also for citations. The impact of Pakistani research is improving. So actually, we can see in our data that Pakistan is literally one of the most rapidly improving nations in the world in these areas. And your representation in the world rankings has improved. We had 3 in the world top 800 last year from Pakistan, 21 Pakistani universities in the world rankings last year. And the other thing that's really exciting is in the impact rankings, We had 36 Pakistani universities in the THE impact rankings. That's demonstrating their social and economic impact through the Sustainable Development Goals. We had several in the world top 400. We had some Pakistani universities were in the world top 100 in key areas. So the University of Agriculture, Faisalabad, was in the world top 25 for climate action. The National Universities of Science and Technology was in the world top 70 for affordable and clean energy. We rank against the niche areas of strength. And what's exciting is Pakistan has now become the third best represented nation in the impact rankings for 2022, which we're publishing in April. So it really is a galvanizing opportunity for Pakistan to make its mark, to show the world the excellence of its universities. And I think that's an incredibly exciting place to be. And I'm very excited to keep close engagement with Pakistani universities, because I think they are absolutely on an exciting upward trajectory.
Yes.
We'll keep moving to stand beside the other universities than in the world. We'll prove that,
Yes.
hopefully.
Yeah. One thing comes into my mind is that post COVID-19 and pre COVID-19, most of the institutions and organizations started working on digital teaching and learning environment, and they were producing good resources for teaching and learning. But what I think is that still there exists a challenge, and the challenge is that teaching, learning, research, this is there post COVID-19, but the assessment criteria and student engagement, I think there are still a lot of challenges lying in these two areas. So what is your opinion? What is your guidance about that? How can we improve these two areas to have better teaching and learning environment?
Because it wasn't that up to mark to assess the student during this COVID era.
Well, I think one of the things we've seen is quite a big moment to challenge our traditional ways of assessing students. And is it the most engaging way? And is it the most effective way to reflect the real world? So a lot of academics I've seen around the world are saying, how appropriate is it today to say to a student, okay, sit down in silence for 3 hours and write 3 or 4 essays with a time clock ticking in complete silence? Is it just a memory test? So that's been, I think, a change that's been forced on us by the pandemic. That's not practical, but also a question of, is it even relevant anymore? That's not really how the workforce works. It's not how the real world works. So I think a lot of universities are moving to very different types of assessment. And I think students respond very, very well to that. It's not about memorizing and regurgitating. It's about engaging and learning and being active throughout your course. So we've seen institutions of, saying things like, make a podcast. We will assess you on your podcast. We've seen institutions saying, well, actually, I'll give you 24 hours to do that exam, because it's not about the time or the memorization. It's about the quality of your arguments and the crafting of your position. We've seen problem-based assessments. Here's a challenge, go off and solve it in a group work. And I think that actually genuinely helps a student see themselves as an active participant in learning. I think there's a real risk that some forms of learning perhaps reduce the student to trying to just achieve some marks, pass a test, teaching to the test. So I think universities have to work harder to really engage their students in real world activities, learning that they can see that would apply out in the broader world. And actually, some of the most challenging aspects of higher education, teaching and learning is probably the best place to prepare us for the uncertainty of a future jobs market. For example, learning basic technical skills in a world where technology is advancing so rapidly is less relevant. We have to teach students, I think, about how to relearn the skills and keep learning and engage in constant curiosity and constant questioning of the situation they're in. We have to learn them to be resilient to face big challenges and obstacles and career changes and career setbacks and problems we haven't encountered yet. So teaching the general resilience, the general problem-solving mentality, I think will really help. And then another point I think is that perhaps I said that the traditional campus won't die off anytime soon, or the traditional in-person teaching won't die off anytime soon. But I think the format of teaching is changing. A lot of people are saying the evidence for the quality, the evidence for the efficiency of a traditional lecture, one person at the front and 300, 400, 500 students listening in silence. People are saying that's not necessarily the best use of that learning opportunity. That's been, of course, the cliche is that's been the form of teaching for centuries. And we can do things differently now. I think there are the lecture still has a role, but whether that's more of a online role, a consumption role, and that you flip the classroom into more engaged lessons, it's up to universities to make that model. But I think there's a change happening, and students are starting to really, I believe, rise up to that and respond really well to that. So it's an exciting time, I think, the pandemic forced us to change, but I think those changes will have permanent positive lessons and positive innovations that we can embrace going forward.
And Phil, what I have seen after this COVID situation is that now the students, they want to get out of the class. They want a scenario to be given by the teacher, and they are really appreciating the flipped class technique. They get the scenario from the teacher in the class, and they get out of the class, they work on it because they like creativity, they like innovation. So you're right. It's not about now teaching a lot of the students by one resource person in 3 hours class, but now it's time to give a challenge to the student and give some resources and get them out of the class and let them bring innovative and creative solutions, I think.
And we have observed that students really do not want to sit for like longer hours without interacting, and there is also a limit. Then they just be interacting with the teacher just for an hour, and after that they'll try to skip and get rid of the lecture even. So again, with the opportunities, there are like more opportunities that we have learned from the COVID, that we cannot bound our students and limitize them to particular time span of the lectures. Very, very challenging thing.
Now, I have a question, Phil. You are the ranking guru of the world. No, that's an honor for you. But you are also the pioneer and creator of the Times Higher Education World Academic Summit, and brings a lot of top-notch people across the globe on one platform, and they speak about different things related to rankings. So, how did you get this idea? And you started all this. So, what was the story behind that?
Well, it's interesting actually, because I think rankings were the spur. What we found is once we started creating the world ranking, we were starting to build a global community. Universities that had never before understood themselves in relation to the rest of the world suddenly had the data and the information. So actually, I think it facilitated this great global dialogue where suddenly universities that were maybe nationally focused started to matchmake and look to collaboration and look to share information with their competitors globally, but also potential new collaborators. So the rankings, I think, began to create this community of international university leaders and international senior scholars. And what was happening is more and more we were being asked to come and talk about the rankings and address international conferences and speak at lectures to explain how the rankings work, to provide insights from the data. The most important thing for us is the data provide real insight into what's happening in the world, what's changing in the world, what are the policy developments, and what are the exciting shifts in the geopolitics of the knowledge economy. So there's more and more demand to discuss and share information. And I was in Brussels at a meeting about rankings, and a colleague from Singapore said, Phil, would you perhaps be interested in developing a meeting for us in Singapore? So we collaborated with Nanyang Technological University, Singapore, and built a 2-day event all about university strategy, university leadership informed by data. And we decided that it would be a good platform to launch the new edition of the rankings as well. So it's not all about rankings, but the rankings inform the conversations. The data provides insights to help shape the conversations about internationalization strategies, talent flows, strategic research priorities. So we created the World Academic Summit in Singapore in 2013, and then we've taken it around the world every year ever since. And it's been extraordinary. We're in New York with NYU in October. Next year, we'll be going to Sydney with the University of Sydney. The year after that, we'll be in Beijing with Tsinghua University in Beijing. And it's become the preeminent global gathering of universities leaders, but also industry leaders and government types as well. But what we've done as well, we've said actually that we want our events series to be fully inclusive. So the World Summit series is a senior leadership strategy event, but we also have the THE Campus Live series where we engage at different levels of professionalization around the challenges of managing your teaching or managing your research teams. And we also have Digital Universities Week. We have a week of activity dedicated entirely to digital transformation. How are we coping with this change? What are the latest technologies we can harness in service of better educational outcomes for students? How do we understand how AI is changing the way we can conduct research? How do we transform our own campuses through tech? So we're really, really excited that last year, despite the pandemic, in a blended hybrid environment, we attracted more than 45,000 people globally to Times Higher Education events, whether they were the big summits, whether they were the more specialist meetings, or whether they were online webinars. So I'm incredibly proud. Perhaps my greatest legacy to the sector is that event series that just brings people together to share good practice, to share inspiration, share ideas, and hopefully drive up quality right across the world's higher education sector. So I'm very, very proud of that.
And Phil, what I have seen that since last 1 or 2 decades, actually Times Higher Education has changed the model of international rankings from absolute model to relative model, in which you offer diversification and different platforms. So institutions which are good at one thing, they are evaluated on that parameter, and they get the ranking into that area. The institutions, other institutions which are good at the second area, they get ranking. So this not only motivates the university, but this type of diversification also make these universities specialize in certain areas. So this model is quite good, I must say.
I have a linking question with that, Phil. Like, what are the different types of ranking that are being conducted by the Times Higher Education?
Well, I think that's a really important point, actually, that we want to celebrate diversity. I think that the risk of global rankings is this idea that there is one correct ranking, that every university should think, the more I look like Harvard or MIT, the better I am. And we have to understand that that's just not the case. There are different missions and different priorities. The world rankings are about a particular type of university, global in their focus, research active at the highest end of scholarly excellence, largely comprehensive. But we have to understand that there are universities that are less research intensive, that aren't there to produce new knowledge in terms of the research environment. They're there to educate people. They're there to provide excellent teaching and strong teaching outcomes. There are other universities that will never compete with Harvard and its multi-billion endowment because they have local priorities. They're in a world with less resource, and they can be transformational in other ways. They can be transformational not in producing a Nobel Prize winner. They can be transformational in providing healthcare workers for a local community that ensures good health and well-being for the population. They could be good in providing educational opportunities for marginalized people or people in poverty to lift them out of poverty. So our approach is that universities' diversity is a great strength, and we don't want to encourage uniformity. We want to provide a framework of data that allows universities to choose their own mission and find their own pathway forward. The world rankings are there if you want to be on the world stage, but there are other rankings. So we have really 3 categories of ranking. There is the world ranking series, which are research led, and we do regionalize those. So we have the world rankings, but within that framework, there's the Asia rankings, the emerging economy rankings, Latin America, Asia, of course, and the subject rankings. They're all part of the same family. They're all global research intensive. But we also have teaching rankings that are very much focused on the student experience, student engagement, student outcomes. We do that in America with the Wall Street Journal. We do that in Japan. And we're starting to develop more and more metrics around teaching excellence. What do you deliver for your students in terms of good outcomes? And then the final category, which for me is probably the most exciting, is impact. What is your impact on society? So you don't have to be rich. You don't have to be super research productive to make a really big contribution to the Sustainable Development Goals. It might be you have a focused area of research excellence, but it might be that you have a very strong track record in policy development or policy engagement with local government or NGOs. It may be that you have a very specific challenge in your community around food security, helping to eradicate poverty. So that's our sense. We have research intensive world ranking series, we have the teaching series, and we have the impact rankings. And for us, that gives us a framework that all sizes and shapes and types of institutions from anywhere in the world have a set of indicators, a set of benchmarks to monitor and support their own development and their own progress, but also celebrates excellence and diversity in the world, but also showcases the wide range of strengths that we can see in global higher education.
And Phil, what I like about the ranking diversity is that, as you just rightly said, that like Howard University, it has billions of dollars of endowment fund, and it takes decades and centuries to build that type of endowment fund. So there is another important ranking, Young Universities ranking.
Yes.
So universities, I guess, who are having age of less than 50 years, so they are also having an opportunity to come into that arena and move forward. And another thing that I like about ranking is you have a ranking called US College Ranking. So what is that ranking? It's I think new ranking is very good.
So that one is that one's really based on teaching. It was responding to a specific need in America, which was based on obviously students' demand for value for money. Students demand that they weren't being exploited by unscrupulous providers. I think Barack Obama, initiated a lot of data to help students make sure that if they're spending a lot of money on tuition, they felt they were going to get a return on that investment. So a lot of accountability around job outcomes and student outcomes. So that one's focused very much on student engagement. So what we do is we look at things like the students paying off their debt on time, students graduating on time. Are they being looked after properly? But the key to that one is something we mentioned earlier, which was student engagement. We did a survey, we do a survey of 100,000 US students around the entire country. And we ask them questions like, are you engaged? Are you stretched? Are you challenged? Do you get enough time with your tutor? Do you get involved in problem-based learning? Would you recommend this course to a family member or a friend? And that to me is the heart of it all. So we're really trying to get to understand the teaching environment much better.
I find another world reputation ranking that seems a bit of attractive one. Would you shed the light on that, Phil? World reputation ranking.
The reputation.
Yes.
Yeah, so the reputation ranking is part of the family of the World University Ranking. So what we do when we create the World University Rankings, we talked earlier about the 13 indicators. Among those 13 indicators, we have a reputation survey. So every year we go out to the global community and we ask them to name the universities they believe are doing the best work in their field, in their country, based on their own direct knowledge. So it's a perception-based issue. It's really meant to complement the bibliometrics and the citation analysis to say, citations can take time to filter through. Some fields are less well served by journals and citations. So we ask scholars themselves, in your opinion, which are the schools and departments doing the greatest work? And we mix that into the 13 metrics. And actually this year we've just closed, or we're about to close the survey for this year. We had 30,000 responses from all over the world. 115 countries respond, and it's all balanced by the genuine distribution of scholarship. It's completely representative sample of the world. We look at how many scholars there are in South Asia, how many in East Asia, how many in North America, and we distribute accordingly and balance accordingly. So it's an amazing global sample of perception, but it's peer-to-peer expert perception. That goes into the world ranking, but actually one of our advisors, one of our sort of critical friends said, well, should you really mix the subjective opinion-based information with the objective metrics around citations? And actually we said, yes, we should, because we think it's a balance. It's important that we counter just pure bibliometrics. But what we agreed to do as an exercise, say, well, we'll publish the reputation data in isolation on its own. So we'll just do a ranking of 100% based on expert peer-to-peer academic opinion. Which are the universities that academics believe are the greatest in the world, based on purely on their expert opinion? And we publish that. And that is literally all it is. The world reputation ranking is simply a list based on a survey of academics. Who do you think is the best? And we collate and gather all that information and publish it. So it's very, very much a subjective judgment, but I think it tells you a wonderful, informative thing about university brands, university reputation within their own communities of experts.
Wow, very diversified and clear at the different levels of ranking. So my next question is, Phil, migratory shifts have been caused throughout the disruption and privations of the pandemic, causing changes in global student traffic. Like, how does this affect the impact ranking of the student or of the university?
So I think some of the markets that depend heavily on international students for financial reasons were suffering quite badly in the pandemic, because universities in Australia, for example, were relying on international students not just to enhance their campuses, but for their fees, their funding. The US and the UK, and to some extent also, were dependent on this money for funding. So I think the loss of that talent, it will be harmful, because it's a loss of income, it's a loss of resources, and it's, of course, the talent itself is a really important part. So I think there are some potential risks there. What we're seeing, I think, is that the US, the UK, and Canada, I think, are bouncing back pretty well. The demand held up. So I don't think they're going to suffer anything dramatically negative as a result of the pandemic in terms of talent, in terms of international students. I think Australia perhaps will, because they had harder border restrictions, they had more strict, more tight controls. So maybe some of the Western traditional elite will be harmed a little bit, but not massively. Australia perhaps being the exception. But one thing I've noticed, I think, is significant, and perhaps will become more significant, is the flows that were always from the east to the west. If you're in India, or if you're in Pakistan, or if you're in China, and you want an education, you had to perhaps go to America or Europe. That is starting to change now. I think we're seeing more regional circulation. I think the pandemic will accelerate that. And we've already seen things like China. Talented undergraduates are increasingly turning away from the West and finding great opportunities within their region. So I suspect actually it will help tip the balance more towards the East. The traditional inequality of all the excellence in the West and everyone flowing to the West, I think that's changing. It'll be slow and it'll be patchy, and it's not going to change overnight. But I think the pandemic will slightly accelerate that. And I think that's a longer term trend we should watch, that actually the world is getting more equal. The opportunities to study outside the West are getting stronger. And I think that will be a permanent shift, I think.
Great. Okay, like talking about the viral revolution, how COVID-19 has changed the research culture?
It's a very important question that we have.
Well, I go back to the question, the conversation earlier, where I said that universities are focusing more on impact. So I think what we're seeing is a lot. So we do Times Higher Education does an annual leader survey. We survey about 200 university presidents across the world every year and ask about their priorities. And the most recent one, they were very clear in agreeing that the Sustainable Development Goals will play a more significant role in shaping their research policy. So you're often starting to see universities looking at their research portfolio in more thematic ways. I remember UCL in London many years ago said, we're going to cluster our research around the world's grand challenges. So rather than having, we're just going to pursue chemistry and biology and whatever. We're going to cluster our research to say climate change. And that really helps to bring the different disciplines together. So I think on one level, universities, I think, are much more focused on saying what is their research for public good, not just pure curiosity-based knowledge for knowledge's sake, which is absolutely vital, and I still think is a huge part of universities. But let's focus more on how we might actually make the world a better place. So I think that's a real shift, and the pandemic, I think, will accelerate that. The other thing I think will continue to grow despite geopolitical tensions is collaboration across borders. Everyone realizes that some of these problems are they're world problems, they're shared problems. We need to share knowledge, share data, share information. So I think international collaboration, which has been rapidly accelerating over the years, will continue to accelerate, even though we are facing all sorts of new nationalistic tendencies and geopolitical challenges. So more collaboration, more interdisciplinary collaboration, more international collaboration, more focus on the public good. For me, they seem to be the sort of overarching trends. And possibly the idea of interdisciplinary research is the most powerful one, I think, because this sense that by bringing very different disciplines together, you create entirely new types of knowledge. You bring very fresh ideas into the research arena. And you can see it, I think, through things like, biology and engineering. We're moving more towards, bioengineering, new disciplines emerging all the time, new ways of understanding the world. So yeah, I think they're probably the key movements that were already there, but I think have been accelerated by COVID.
And Phil, what I witnessed is that pre-COVID-19 scenario, developing countries, institutions used to sign a lot of MOUs with international and national institutions and industry partners, but they were not really implemented in their terms. But post COVID-19, now the collaborations have really accelerated in terms of real implementation of the terms that we used to sign, and now they are having a more stronger and constructive output now post COVID-19. So that is really helpful, and that will surely help the universities to go a long way. One more question that I have is that, Jenny, what are the lessons learned from COVID-19, and what are the future of the universities now after this 19 COVID scenario?
Well, I think
in the terms of ranking.
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of rankings, there might be some shifts, the geopolitical shifts. I think the balance between East and West will shift. One of the things I've written about in recently is this idea of a great global leveling up. I think we're seeing now that actually partnerships, research collaborations need to be more equal, more mutual, less unbalanced. So we're seeing in the world rankings a great leveling up. I've called it a great leveling up because developing countries defined as emerging economies are all, or many of them are making progress. We've talked about Pakistan rising up rankings, making improvements, China, the Middle East as well. I think the Arab world in particular seeing some great change, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, North African countries, the UAE. So there's a sense for me of a great leveling up. The world is becoming more equal when it comes to universities. And I hope that one of the great legacies of COVID is that continues, that we understand we have a common humanity, that we need a more equal world, and we need a more equal distribution of talent and knowledge creation. So that's quite a general idea, but I think certainly in rankings terms, we will see the overall top of the rankings becoming over time, slowly but surely more inclusive, more diverse, more equal. But that's very slow and steady change rather than any rapid change.
Yes.
And as we are also adopting the new normal era after this COVID-19. So moving towards a rapid fire round, the most entertaining part of the show. So Phil, are you ready?
Yeah, absolutely. Go for it.
All right. So, what is the first thing you do when you wake up in the morning?
I make a cup of tea for myself and my wife. My wife, I get up first and I have to make a cup of tea for my wife. That's the very first thing I'll do.
Oh, that's really cute. Okay. Which book are you reading these days?
Do you know, the sad thing is I read a lot for work, which means I don't read very much for pleasure. I only ever read on holiday for fiction for pleasure. I read on holiday, and I haven't been on holiday for 2 or 3 years because of the pandemic. So I'm really sorry to say my reading is always professional sector reading. So yeah, I haven't read much for a while, actually. I do like really challenging books that really make you think hard about yourself. So perhaps one of the most challenging books I read, which I found most sort of moving, was The Road by Cormac McCarthy. It's a sort of post-apocalyptic story of a father and son. So I do like really challenging books, but yeah, I don't read much these days. I have to get more holiday time to read more.
Okay. So as you said, you skipped, like you have, it's been 3 years that you have been traveled. So what would be the best destination you wish to travel as you get the chance?
So I've been incredibly lucky. I've traveled all over the world in my career. My family bought me a map, and I got to count. I've traveled to more than 60 countries in the last couple of decades. So I'm incredibly privileged to have traveled all over the world. I think the areas where I've seen less of, and I'd love to see more of, it would be South America. I've been to Mexico, I've been to Brazil, I've been to Chile, I've been to Peru, but there's many countries in South America I've never been to, and I'd love to see more of that. And then I'm also very conscious I'd like to spend more time in Africa. I've been to South Africa, I've been to Nigeria, I've been to Ghana, but and I've been to Egypt and North Africa, but I haven't really spent much time in Africa. So those are priorities, to understand better and see more of the world. And of course, I couldn't resist saying that I haven't been to Pakistan since 1994. So I do want an excuse to return. I'm sure it's a very different nation now than it was when I was last there many years ago. So Pakistan would be high on my list.
Wow.
And Phil, did you have the chance to visit the northern areas of Pakistan? Because these areas are called next to Switzerland of Pakistan. So, did you get the chance?
When you visited back in 90s?
So I've been to, I went to, I was in Karachi, I was in Islamabad, I was in Peshawar. I actually was incredibly lucky to travel the Khyber Pass in Peshawar into Afghanistan, acting as a journalist very early in my career. So yes, I've seen quite a lot of Pakistan, but very much many years ago. So I'd love to see the changes.
Right. The last good TV show you watched?
I really like Succession. I don't know if you have Succession. It's the big media mogul family. It's very entertaining. It's one of those rare dramas where all the characters are pretty terrible. You don't really support or empathize with any of them, but it's such a extraordinary dynamic and so beautifully written. I love Succession.
All right. One piece of technology that you cannot live without?
Oh, that one's easy. It has to be my phone.
Everybody's phone.
I'm slightly obsessed with Twitter.
The most influential person in your life?
I think you know the answer, by the way, that you are going to give, but still we want to hear from you.
No, I'm going to play it safe, and I'm actually going to say my family. You know, my parents pushed me to aspire to push my boundaries and be ambitious, and then so my parents, but then also my children, I think, really inspire me to work hard and stay focused. So it's an easy answer, but I'm going to say my family.
Wow. If you got a do-over in your life, what would that be?
I think I'd quite like to spend more time on my health and fitness. I'd like to do more sport and exercise. Often I don't have much time and I can be a bit lazy. So yeah, I'd like to be a fitter, healthier person as I enter my later stages of life.
Good.
Phil, what is your biggest strength?
I'm sure other people would have very different opinions on this. I would possibly say my patience, because I think in my line of work, I have to spend a huge amount of time traveling the world. Obviously, we've had a break with COVID, but I spend a lot of time in airports, a lot of time traveling, a lot of time being challenged on. Obviously, rankings are very, very controversial. Every single person you meet will have an opinion about the methodology is wrong, or you need to change this metric or change that metric, or my university's in the wrong position. And I feel it's very important that Times Higher Education are very accountable and transparent and open, but it requires a lot of patience after with a 16-hour flight and a 11-hour time difference to go into a very detailed session about ranking methodologies and be patient and thoughtful and listen to all the comments. So I would say maybe patience is one of my strengths.
And who was your role model and who is now your role model? So, because there are two role models in every person's life.
I'd probably say, you know, sometimes my previous bosses have been quite inspiring. You know, the first person who gave me my job at Times Higher Education, a woman called Oriel Stevens. I was young, I was inexperienced, but she gave me an opportunity. And then she also gave me a lot of freedom to pursue my journalistic interests, which were great. So I think I've been lucky to have a lot of supportive mentors and a lot of inspiring people around me in a professional context. So that's been an important part of my life.
And now who are you following? Who is your current role model?
Well, you know, I probably have to say my current CEO, Paul Howarth, the chief executive of Times Higher, because he came in March 2020, and I think he's really inspired us all. You know, I've been at Times Higher Education for 25 years. We've always been dynamic. We've always been highly ambitious, and we've been growing and developing really rapidly. But Paul brought in a lot of fresh thinking and a lot of new energy and new dynamism. And I think he made sure we all responded to the global crisis in an incredibly positive, proactive way. And we've launched all sorts of new initiatives under his leadership, you know, including the new THE student platform, a new global resource bank called THE Campus, which is a place for sharing best practice. So yeah, he's really driven us all on and given us a new lease of life. And of course, he is my boss, so I probably have to say him.
Right.
All right. So Phil, are you a sports person?
I watch sport better than I play sport. So I'm a big fan of football in the UK. I'm from Newcastle, so I'm a big supporter of Newcastle United. But I must say I'm better at watching it than playing it these days.
Likewise. Your favorite color to wear?
I kind of always wear black, actually. I'm very boring. I have a lot when I'm outside of work in suits and shirts. I regularly wear. I've got lots and lots of different black shirts that I tend to wear all the time. I don't know what's wrong with me. I'm a bit boring, but yeah, unfortunately it's black. But I hope I'm not a dark character.
No, but black is a very decent color for men. So
I think
it's not boring.
And it is like in everybody's list, either the guys or the ladies, they both have the black in their list. All right, so here ends my rapid fire round.
Now, the last question is that it is more of a request. What message would you like to give to ILMA University, to its students, faculty, and the fraternity out here? And what is your feedback about this show, Qtrix?
Well, the first thing I would say, this probably sounds a little bit schmaltzy, I guess, but I genuinely think my message to anyone is to be kind. You know, we've got a situation where there's some really tough and really challenging situations geopolitically. We've got, of course, got the invasion of Ukraine. It's focusing people's attention in the world, and particularly in Europe. But we've got all sorts of geopolitical tensions and national tensions. I honestly believe, having traveled the world, having been in every continent, having been in north, south, east, west, we all share a common humanity. We're all human beings. We're incredibly similar We have different religions, different cultural backgrounds, different experiences, but we all share our common humanity. The one thing I find is we should be more united as humanity. We've got big problems to facing the whole world. We mustn't be divided. We must be kind and tolerant of one another. And it sounds like a cliche, but it's just so true. So that's my message to everyone. Global higher education is in a brilliant position to cross borders, to transcend geopolitics, to have common humanity, common pursuit of knowledge and education. So that's my message. And in terms of this show, I commend you for trying to showcase people from our community. I think it's great that I think one of the big challenges for higher education and for science and research is public engagement. We need to try and encourage a more broad understanding of the sector, a more inclusive and more open approach to how it all works and who's involved. So I applaud you for this series, and I thank you very much for inviting me to share my thoughts and really commend you for this initiative.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Phil. It was really nice to have you on our show. It was really a great conversation, and I know people are going to be impacted by listening to live. Thank you.
And on behalf of ILMA University, the entire management, the Board of Governors, our Chancellor, Mr. Numan Lakhani, the Vice Chancellor and the entire team, we applaud you and we are grateful to you for sparing your time. And ladies and gentlemen, with this, we come to the end of this show. And I am hopeful that you all have enjoyed the show, and we must have learned a lot of new things and the ideas and the experiences of our honorable guest, Mr. Phil Batty. And he was very kind to share about the latest progress of Pakistani universities, and that is quite encouraging. But this is the start. This is not the end. So this is a long and troublesome journey, but we are sure that under the leadership and guidance of Times Higher Education and their professional team, our universities will be accelerating, and they will be